However, our politicians refuse to acknowledge the role Islam plays in terrorism, we will continue to experience the horror of terrorist attacks in the West, such as what happened in Manchester this week, along with all the other attacks in recent times in the UK, US, France, Philippines, Indonesia, and the Link Cafe siege in Sydney. These attacks on innocent people, on children, are a direct result of some Muslims literally obeying the vile and barbaric commands explicitly stated in the Quran Hadiths and that arise from the example of the so-called Prophet Muhammad. Politicians who refuse to state the obvious and who refuse to discuss the very real threat of Islam must take some responsibility for the violence, fear, injuries and deaths that do result. Appeasing attitudes, acting as apologists or ignoring the reality of terror and its direct relationship to the Islamic texts is irresponsible and dangerous. You know, Ramadan starts this week. No doubt, some of you who live in major cities will see it heralded by the big supermarkets who are out to make another buck or two. Who knows, the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull may even try to appease the Islamic community by again hosting a halal-certified iftar dinner in Kirralie House. I wonder if he'll have to purchase a whole new set of halal dinnerware or if they can reuse the specially purchased plates and cutlery from last year's affair. I digress. Ramadan is the 9th month in the Islamic calendar. Ramadan is supposed to be about prayer, fasting, charity, self-improvement. I mean, no one really has a problem with any of those personal worship development aspects. But it's thought that the first verses of the Quran were revealed to the so-called Prophet, Muhammad, toward the end of Ramadan, making it an especially holy period for Muslims. Now, just like many people celebrate Christmas by giving gifts or going to church, yet give little thought to the religious motivation, it's similar with many Muslims. Many people celebrate Easter with chocolate and hot cross buns, but give little thought to the Christian or even pagan worship origins of that festival. Ramadan for many Muslims is nothing more than fasting during the day, feasting long into the night, and having a big celebration at the end with new clothes and gifts. Now that in itself is not a threat to anyone, but they are also encouraged to read the Quran often during Ramadan. Some Muslims recite the entire Quran by the end of Ramadan through special prayers which are held in the mosques every night of the month, during which a section of the Quran is recited. And this is the part that concerns me. Some passages of the Islamic texts, they're nice, they won't do any harm to anyone. However, there are more than 100 verses which specifically and explicitly command violence towards those who are not Muslims, toward women, gays, apostates, and minority groups. It is reported that there's a close connection between fasting and jihad. Now, when it comes to fasting, it's known as jihad of the soul, aimed at restraining it from sinning, while the second reference to jihad is against the enemies, aimed at preventing them from spreading corruption in the world. Moreover, fasting is a powerful means to prepare the soul for jihad. That is, to school oneself in obedience, devotion, resilience and endurance, which are the virtues, supposedly, of a jihad fighter. On Ramadan, it is said, Allah grants fighters special strength, despite, or rather by virtue, of their fasting. Now, some Islamic groups call Ramadan the month of jihad. Groups like ISIS and Hamas appeal to the Quran Hadiths, an example of the so-called Prophet, to strike terror into the hearts of unbelievers and to prove their devotion to Allah during this month. It is said that those who gain martyrdom during the month of Ramadan are doubly rewarded in paradise. The night of power, or the night of decree, as described in Surah 97, is considered the holiest night of the year for Muslims. This is the night in which they believe the first revelation of the Quran was sent down to Muhammad, stating that this night was better than 1,000 months. In the very next chapter, Christians and Jews are described as the worst of creatures. It says, indeed, they who disbelieved among the people of the scripture and the polytheists will be in the fire of hell, abiding eternally therein. Those are the worst of creatures. Now, verses like this, along with others that state it's okay to beat your wife, that women have less value than a man, that Muslims are not to befriend Christians or Jews, bigoted passages about how ape-like Jews are or worse, as well as scores of verses that explicitly command violence to apostates and to those who aren't Muslims, are read and recited and reinforced during this month of Jihad and the Night of Power. Now, I don't have any qualms about wishing Muslims well who want to fast, pray, feast or be charitable, as long as they unequivocally reject the vile and barbaric commands of the Islamic texts. I do have great reservations about those who intend to become more devout by becoming more intent on following the Quran, Hadiths and example of Muhammad. Now, until we're having this constant, open, vigorous debate, I fear we will see incidences of terrorism continue to rise and divisive acts by Muslims who are refusing to accept that Western democratic values are in fact superior to Islamic ideology.